Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks workshop. I'm going to be evaluating a Guild guitar for repair. Today is December 12th, 2019 for calendar reference, but it will probably be a couple of months before I actually get to working on this guitar. It is a very nicely made Guild guitar. It looks really nice. It's got a few little whoop-dees. You can see kind of a little line there. The pickguard has shrunk and has created some cracks. I don't know if you can see those very well, but it's otherwise in pretty good shape. It's got a pretty good belly bulge right here. The action is fairly high. The customer's words are that it's barely playable. I don't disagree with that. I kind of think it is kind of hard to play. The truss rod cover to me looks upside down, but that may just be me. I don't know. I don't know every model, and maybe that's the way they put these on from the factory. I don't know, but it looks to me like it's been turned around somewhere in its early life. Doesn't look like it's been moved in a long time, so it's probably been that way a long time. Let me tell you the model number. The model is a D35NT, it looks like. It's handwritten. The serial number, boy, honestly, it scribbles out into the outside edge, so I doubt I can give you the whole serial number, but what I can read clearly is 18266. I think that next number is a 5, and there looks like there could be another number out into the perimeter, and I'm going to say maybe that's a 7 if there is another number. It's really hard to say. The back on the guitar is mahogany. Looks really nice. Really pretty guitar, I think. Very nicely made guitar. The neck looks nice. It's got this typical wear. I don't know the exact age. If I was guessing, I'd guess it from anywhere from the 80s. From the 60s to the 80s is what I would guess it, but I don't really honestly know the age of it. And I'm not going to look it up because I don't really care. The customer wants it put up in pretty good shape, actually. She doesn't care if I replace the pickguard, things like that. So she's not worried about its looks exactly in terms of perfect looks. She said it can look its age, that's okay. But for me, what I see, just taking it out of the case, there's the two main things I see that I don't like is the belly bulge here, and there's, you know, a little bit of a underbow in the neck. And when I say underbow, I don't mean relief. I literally mean underbow. It's way past relief. And in fact, it's quite a bit. And that, ordinarily I say you don't tighten the truss rod to change the neck angle. But in this particular case, tightening the truss rod might actually change the neck angle. And the reason is because from about here to about here, there's a terrific underbow. So if I can tighten that truss rod and pull that underbow out, it will actually possibly lower the peg head in this case. Typically, this area right here on the first fret is pretty much level with this, maybe even slightly below level of this. And that area right now is almost the fretboard width above this. Above this top, so it's on the edge of needing a neck reset. But in this particular case, like I said, it's not normal. This time the truss rod possibly, if it's loose especially, could be the trigger to changing this neck angle a little bit. But only if the truss rod's already loose. If it's already tight, not a chance, not a chance. So let's just explore that real quick and see what we find. Just so you know, the guitar came to me with 5 strings. This one was actually broke and laying inside the case, but I just took it off. I tensioned up these 5 strings that were on it just to see what the action looked like and all that. Let's just test the action real quick just to see where we're at and see if we make a difference real quick by tightening the truss rod. It's pretty high. I think we're at about 135-ish, 135 thousandths on the big string. Let me see where we're at on the little string. We're actually pretty good on the E string. On the small string, it's about 90 thousandths to 100 thousandths, somewhere in there. So we're not too far off on that string. This one's pretty far off. roughly 135,000, 140,000, somewhere in there. So I'm going to loosen all the strings a lot. You should never, and I say this very loudly and I'll repeat it, you should never tighten a truss rod with your strings tight. You should just not do it. You should loosen your strings all the way. I know a lot of people have argued with me on that already, but I don't care. You can argue all you want. You should not do it. You should not tighten your truss rod, and especially if you're going to tighten it significantly, you should definitely not tighten it with your strings tight. I will also tell you that these strings are wound up the post rather than down the post, which is not a good thing because it puts a lot more tension on the peg head because it's giving more leverage to the posts. The strings have more leverage on the post when the strings are wound up the post rather than down the post. And so what I mean is, as you're winding the string, it should go further and further down the post this way, not up the post. Well, that interruption was yet another customer calling from Florida, had a bunch of fiddles that he wanted repaired, and I had to turn him away. I unfortunately have to turn away 3 to 5 people every single day, 365 days out of the year. So I've turned way more than 1,000 people away in the last year, and I'm sorry, but it's just a reality. I can't get to everybody, and I am so far behind, I'll never get caught up at this point. I hate it, but it's the truth. Yes, that's been on there a very long time. It was even kind of stuck down. So my hope is nobody's messed with it, and maybe it's really loose. These strings are incredibly loose, as you can see. There's no tension on them whatsoever. I'm gonna see if we can get in here. This is actually a very small nut, smaller than any I've really run into in a long time. Well, it's not real tight, I can tell you. I tightened it pretty tight there. I can see it's almost flat. It's probably still a little low right here. May not get that out, but I'm going to tighten it a little bit more just to see. So we might have got lucky in the fact that that truss rod was not tight, because it might save a neck reset in this particular case. Like I said, that is not the norm at all, and normally you don't tighten a truss rod to change your neck angle and change your action. In this particular case, just because of the way I could see the neck had such an underbow, it might help in this case. We'll tune it back up. As I suspected, tightening the truss rod on this guitar, I specifically want to emphasize I'm talking this guitar only. Tightening the truss rod on this guitar changed the action right here a ton. A ton. We're down to, this was in the 130 to 40 range before. It's now down to about exactly 100. So it's changed it like 40 thousandths, 35 to 40 thousandths right here. So this is down to 100, which is acceptable. This is down to, gee whiz, too low even, if anything. It's down to 55 to 60 thousandths on this side right here. So that's the good news. It helped us a lot. I wish it was all good news. It's not. It's bad news. It has made it unplayable up here. Now, I didn't expect that, I gotta be honest. These strings are sitting on the first fret now. I mean, they literally are sitting on the first fret. Never expected that. So that one there kind of caught me blind. As I look down the fretboard now, what I see is actually an S. And that's sad. So I'm exaggerating now, you understand. But it's high here, goes down right here, starts to go back up here in the middle, and then kind of goes back that way. It tails off right here at the end. Wow, that's maybe the first one of those I've ever seen. Now you can loosen the truss rod under string tension. That's okay. And in this particular case, we need to do that to see what we come up with. So I'm gonna loosen it a little bit. That helped a little bit. I want to see where the neck is. It's not horrible now. It's not perfect by any stretch. What that did was it mostly straightened it out from here to here. It's still a little high here. It's still a little low here. and then it just kind of seems to straighten out, which is not too bad. You could probably live with that. The neck angle is dang near perfect now. We might be able to live with it where it's at. Let's see what we did to our action now. Action wise, we're up to about 110, so we've lost about 10 thousandths or so right there. That's not too bad. We're still pretty low on this side, but we're back to about 70, so that's doable there. I think we might have just saved a neck reset on this just by evaluating it like that. I'd like to see the fretboard a little flatter. Like I said, there's a low spot right here, but that's not horrible. What we could do is file more of these frets off, kind of level it all across. Right here's a slight low spot, so I think we can level across that spot and get a fairly flat plane the whole way. This area here is not nearly as critical. If we have to file away most of the frets here, I don't see that as being a big, huge issue. I don't think we'll have to file them all the way away anyway. I think we just saved a ton of work, a ton of time and cost for the customer just by messing with the truss rod in this case. That is not the norm, guys. I just want to stress it and stress it and stress it. In fact, that's about the first time I've seen that, and I couldn't even tell you how many years that the truss rod really made the difference on the action, because normally it doesn't. But we're going to have to make a new nut for this, it looks like, because this nut's just going to be too low now. It's really still sitting on the first fret. So it's going to take a lot of fret leveling, a new nut, work on the saddle. I don't think that I'm going to do anything about the bulge because the action is fine. If the action was still really high, we'd probably have to work down here. I don't think the bridge is coming off of it. Based on what I can see, the bridge looks tight everywhere. I don't see a problem. So if you don't have a problem, don't fix a problem. We can lower it a little bit on this side, and I think this side's okay, but we'll probably make a new saddle anyway. This saddle, while it looks okay, probably could be better. The customer's really uptight about this pickguard shrinkage and this little crack here. That damage is already done. I doubt it's going to get any worse. If it were my guitar, I'd leave it. That'd be me. Some people wouldn't do that. Some people wouldn't leave it. But if it were mine, I'd leave it, because you're going to create more damage to fix something that's probably not going to get any worse. And I don't see any reason to do that. That's just my opinion. I don't always think the way other folks think. But boy, it's really hard to check the intonation right now because of the first fret problem. So what I will do is I'll put a piece of paper under the two E strings up here just to get them up high enough to play, and then we'll check the intonation. All right, I've got the two outer strings, papered up down here so that they don't buzz. You can see that was pretty much on center there. A little bit high, if anything. Keep getting a little different reaction from the tuner here. I'm not getting a consistent reaction. But it's pretty close. Don't think this is that far off. That's not too far off either. So the intonation wise, I don't think we really have to do much. So, the customer may be getting off real cheap here compared to what she actually was expecting. I'll have to get a hold of her and see how far she wants to push it, because her note is quite lengthy and there is quite a bit she wanted done. If it were my guitar, about all I would do at this point would be a fret leveling, a new nut, a new saddle, and that's probably all I would do. Well, friends, fast forward about 4 months. We're in the middle of April now. As a matter of fact, it's almost tax time. The original tax time, that is. I know it's been extended this year due to the coronavirus. But we are just now getting to work on the Guild guitar. So it's been sitting in the state you saw it last in the first part of this video all this time.
just crazy busy. And of course, when we evaluated it originally, we were in the original workbench area. Now we're in the new workbench area. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is just get rid of the strings. I had put paper under these because they were buzzing really bad. Well, I went back and reviewed the footage on this guitar so that I would have an idea what I need to do to it again without having to reevaluate it. And I think I've got my idea. So as I had mentioned, I'm going to make a new nut and saddle. The saddle back here is incredibly loose. If you look at it, you can see it just falls into the slot. And anytime they just fall into the slot like that, they're way too loose. And it wiggles back and forth. And then we know this is too low up here. Often these nuts are easy to get loose. This one here, I've already tapped on it lightly. It doesn't seem like it's going to come loose real easily. So I'm going to, just to try to protect anything up here, I'm going to cut along the nut just at the finish line to hopefully keep the finish from chipping out. I feel like I've done a pretty good job there. It seemed like it made a nice clean line along there. What I often do is just take some little wooden block like this and tap it. And of course, everything's a hammer. And there we go, we broke it loose without any problem. It's still in there. In a case like that, I might turn it up on its edge, see if I can get the X-Acto knife under the end, because there still could be some tear out here if we're not careful. And I'll try to cut the ends like this. I think that did it, and I think it'll come out of there now. Oh, it did chip out a little bit, even after I scored it like I did. So, you know, unfortunately, it did still chip out a little bit. Because that chip is perfect, and if I set it back in here, it fills that slot perfectly, I think I'm just going to go ahead and CA glue that little chip back while it's still in place on this nut, and then score it heavier and just break it back off of there. It's unfortunate, but that kind of thing happens when you're doing this kind of repair. You just sometimes can't avoid it. And even like I said, I did take the extra caution of scoring it, and it felt like it scored it all the way down to the wood, and yet it still chipped out. So sometimes you don't get the lucky break. I'm not sure this is going to show up real well for you, but I'm going to try to get the CA glue on here without it running everywhere. I've got the little tiny nozzle on this. You know, you can really make a mess with this fast. I think I did a pretty good job of just getting it where I want it. And now I'm going to try to get it just on the tip of this. And then I'm going to try very hard to get it set right back down in the proper place. And then push back down with a little wooden block here. Spritz it with the accelerator. After it's had a little bit of time to set up, if you do that, it doesn't turn white on you that way. All right, so hopefully that got it back down in there. I'll try scoring it a little bit better this time in that spot there, and hopefully it'll break off this time and leave it there. Yeah, that time it did. You can see it, but it's not very bad at all. So there you go. There's just another trick on how to repair a problem. Just, you know, don't panic. Just put the thing back in place, glue it back, and then score it again. Well, I was going to clean this up, but I don't need to keep this nut. This nut is of no value whatsoever. I'm not even going to use it as a pattern. While I've got the CA glue out, I'm going to try to stabilize these fine cracks that were caused by the pickguard shrinkage. But, you know, I think it's more than just pickguard shrinkage, to be honest, because there's a crack on this side too. I think something happened to this guitar and it got dropped or something. Either it got dropped on this end or something. Maybe it fell and hit the neck hard, because there's a fine line crack on both sides of the neck. And often that's from some kind of traumatic injury. This part here, you know, that actually is just an extension of that one. I kind of think this is not the typical pickguard shrinkage. I kind of think this is a traumatic event crack. That's what it looks like. Maybe it fell down like this
hard or something and cause these cracks on both sides. I don't know. And the crack extends all the way down. I kind of just don't think that's pickguard. I kind of think it's something else. It's hard to say. I'm going to look inside it and see if I can see much more damage in there or whatever. Actually, I don't see much. Yeah, I can't really see the crack on the inside much at all. Very fine line. They have an extension under here too from the block. That extension covers those two spots. So let me see if, did someone add that later maybe? No, I don't think so. It looks original. For my money, we're just going to stabilize it with CA glue because I don't think there's anything else we can do in this case. Same way over here, it looks worse on the outside than on the inside. There's almost nothing on the inside to see. It almost looks perfectly smooth and flat on the inside. So, you know, even on this side here too, and this crack I think extends all the way up through here actually. I'm not so sure on this side. It's hard to say. That may not be an actual crack. It may just be the finish cracking. It's difficult to say. Either event, we're going to try the CA glue here. Go with caution on this because you can just make a mess out of this. And so many people tell me how they've ruined their finishes and ruined their guitars with this. So be very careful if you decide to use CA glue. These little micro nozzles help a lot. But it's also knowing how to turn the bottle down, how to apply the glue. It's not as simple as it looks on video often. So be very careful. If you know how to put it on and wipe it off at the right moment, you can do it and you really can't even tell you've done anything. Yet the glue does penetrate and go down in there. It just doesn't look like the typical damage I see from normal pickguard shrinkage. Very similar. Oh man, got a little more glue going on there than I wanted, but it is going down in the crack too. Got lucky. Can't even tell it. Looks all right. I hesitate to spritz this with the accelerator because of the pickguard. I don't like to get these chemicals on these plastics. Now the problem, if I put the CA glue on it again, it will gel up almost instantly and you'll see it. If you look at this now, I seriously don't think you can tell I put any CA glue on there at all. I mean, I don't think you can see it at all where the CA glue was there. It's all in how you do it. But yet it went down in there and wicked down in there very well. I'm just going to let this set for about 10 or 15 minutes to give that CA glue time to dry before I move it around anymore because I want to make sure that that does actually bond. And as you'll recall in the first part of the video, you know, I told you it was kind of like an S curve going on. Well, this fret right here is, the third fret is actually high. It's rocking on the third fret. The rest of it's not too terribly far off. We're going to concentrate a lot on here and then just level the whole thing. I can feel it grabbing on that fret. You can see a lot of filing on both sides of that fret right there. So that fret definitely was the high spot. Okay, let's see what we got now. This straight edge is a bit long, but it's working. There's still a very tiny amount of rock. But actually now it's rocking off of the fourth fret very slightly. I've gotten the question a lot of times, how many times can you file frets? Well, it really depends on a lot of factors. You know, how much it's played, all those kinds of things. But I would just say the answer to the question this way, you can typically file them much more than most people think. Most people think once they see grooves in them that the frets just need to be replaced, and that's not generally the case. Generally, you can file them 2 or 3 times, sometimes more than that. Just depends on how much it's been played. Actually, it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to do my sight down it. I like that better than even the straight edge, to be perfectly honest with you. I really feel like I do a good job looking down the fretboard and being able to tell where the problems are. It looks pretty good right now. There's still a considerable amount of height back here, and so I'm going to work on this area a little bit more. I really don't feel anything now. It feels like it flows pretty well. I think we're probably about as flat as we're going to get this. You know, looking down it, it really does look pretty good now.
fact, I don't really see any problem now. If anything, there's a very slight overbow, overcrown, if you will, over relief, whatever you want to refer to it as. But anyway, there is a slight, and I'm talking very slight, overbow in the whole neck now compared to the ski ramps and S's that it did have. It looks to be one consistent flow now, which is perfect. So when you put the tension on it, that should pull that out and give it just enough relief to make it work real well. So now we're going on to, I'm going to go ahead and finish this fret job off camera because you've seen me do it so many times. I'm just going to recrown all the frets. I'm going to polish up the frets. I'm going to level in between the frets with a flat razor blade and just oil it and all that. So I'm not going to show any of that unless I run into something unique. And I am going to show making the nut for this and making the saddle. Well, as I said, I wasn't filming this, and I haven't filmed it to this point, obviously, but I have already recrowned all the frets, and I used this fret recrowning file. Now this is the large. These are clearly medium-sized frets. The reason I use that is because I had to file these frets so much that the tops were really flat. And because that it was much harder to recrown them with the medium file. So I went to the larger one. Now the problem with the larger one is these two edges would stick down so far that they would actually leave scratches in the fretboard, except for the fact that I, long time ago, took the edges and honed them down on like a flat sander or flat grinder or something, and I don't even remember how I did it. I did it a long time ago, and I knocked these edges, just the edges, way down so that just the crown part is there, and that way you can use it on smaller frets or on lower frets or whatever without scratching up your fretboard. So there's your tip for the day, and this is a big tip for me. I mean, this was huge. This file will file a crown back in there much faster than the medium will. So there you go. I kind of changed my mind on that nut in terms of using it for a pattern. It's always good to use the old parts for patterns when you can. Depends on where you measure it, but basically it comes out to 195 thousandths of an inch. I think you can probably see that there. So then I made the new blank out of a piece of antler, and you can see that it's just a piece of antler that you just square up. To the half of a thousandths, it's exact. I mean, 195 and a half, and the other one was 195 and a half, or 195.5, if you will. So to the thousandth of an inch, or even 10,000th of an inch in this case, they're the exact same size. I thought it was funny. The guy's comment the other day on a video said, he said 3/4 of a millimeter. That cracks me up. Like he either didn't believe that I measured that accurately or, he was astonished that I measured that accurately. I'm not really sure what the comment meant. It doesn't matter. I just wrote back to him. I said, well, I normally measure in thousandths of inches, which is only 1/40th of a millimeter. So if you divide a millimeter into 40 pieces, that's basically 1,000th of an inch. And so here we are down to the 10,000th of an inch and have those exactly the same, at least in those two places I measured. When you're measuring in that kind of preciseness, you can measure across a piece and it'll vary a little bit, although this one's pretty, that thickness sander I have does a pretty good job of getting it exact. So it measures by 5/10,000ths of an inch thicker at one end than it does at the other end. I don't know if I can accept that or not. It is kind of funny that we're measuring that kind of level of detail. But on the other hand, these things allow you to do that. And that thickness sander that I made, it just allows you to do that. And it's not that hard. I mean, so since it's not hard, you might as well do it. I just thought you might find that a little bit humorous. So now that I've got the thickness, made exactly the same as the old one, that way it'll take the same footprint. Now the problem is, I want to get the angle on the bottom, but before I even do that, I've got glue on the front end of this that I have to get off. The way I'll do that is just scrape it off with a X-Acto knife. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll show it to you here. There's a lot of glue buildup right on the very end of the fretboard there. So I've got to get rid of all that glue buildup. Scrapers are the best thing to use for things like that, in my opinion. And in this case, I'm just using an X-Acto blade as a scraper. And then right in the very corner, I get in and actually try to cut it out a little bit more. You know, the corner of the new piece, I don't want anything interfering with it. So right in the very corner, I try to cut the corner just a little deeper or something, if you will. I just want to make sure there's nothing there that'll hold me out. And often the corner is the spot that will hold you out. Okay, so I've got that cleaned up pretty well. Now I take the blank and I set it in place, and then I start to see how does it fit? Does it need something more? It's rocking, and mostly that's because the bottom isn't perfectly flat on this. So I have my little square file, and I'm going to work on the bottom of this and try to flatten it out. And the reason it's not flat is because of the tear out that happened when I knocked it out of there. Not a big deal, and there wasn't much tear out, but it does make a difference. So if we just take this and square it off and flatten it out, I like to use the square file because I can be square against the end of the nut and square down to the base then. That's looking pretty good. We may be there. That gets rid of all the tear out and the old glue and everything all in one fell swoop, really. And now it looks perfectly tight back to the fretboard. I don't see a gap anywhere. Let me look at the bottom and see if it's the same. I think I'm going to put a slight radius on this to help it get into the corner a little better. And you can just do that with any file pretty much. Just knock off the very sharp corner. That fits in there pretty well. I'll end up having to do that again because I just noticed that the front edge of this isn't perfectly square. There's some original antler round off right here. So we've got to take some more of this off the bottom, and then I'll have to refit it again. I didn't realize that until just now. So those are the kinds of things that happen when you're dealing with natural material. Okay, now that I've got it all fitting up pretty tightly, pretty well, again, there's another natural issue that I'm dealing with, and this isn't that big a deal on this one. There's a little bit of porosity here that you can probably see in the dark. Now that's going to go against the end of the fretboard. You won't really see it, but it is extending up that way. So once again, I'm going to take off a little more off the bottom here to hide the rest of that on the end of the fretboard. And that porosity won't hurt anything because the solid will be, you know, above the fretboard and where the strings are writing. And again, it's a very minor amount anyway, so it's not even a big deal one way or the other. It's just mostly the looks in this particular case. So I'm going to knock off a little bit more of the bottom just to hide a little bit more of that. Okay, now I'm real satisfied with the fit up. I say that, and then here I just had another thought. If you notice, this is the natural edge of the antler, and it's just naturally round and it's naturally sloped off. I can actually use that to my advantage if I cut this down a little bit more yet. So I think I will. I'm going to just, for my own reference, I'm just going to mark off a little bit here. That gives me some idea how much I could knock off. I could probably knock off about this much more and be fine. And then that way I can use most of that natural curve to my advantage. Instead of me having to round it all off, it will already be rounded off and just take a minimal amount of work. So it's easy to just knock this off on my sander. So I'm just going to go over to the disc sander, lay it flat on the table, and knock off about that much more. Okay, this time I think we're just about right. It could probably go a hair more lower, but I think we're fine. So I'm just going to mark this side. I've got this side lined up a little tiny bit proud, and then I'm going to mark this off. On this side here where it's just tiny bit proud, I'm just going to try to put a pencil, get some pencil lead on that so I can see it when I grind it. And I like to mark it on the bottom side as well, and that way as soon as that mark disappears, then I know I'm right where I want to be. I have been using the Formula 560 canopy glue for nuts over the last year or so. I like it. It seems to work good. I like the fact that it's also water soluble, so you can clean it up real easy. It sticks anything to anything pretty much, flows well, doesn't cause any problem, sets up reasonably quickly, so it's got a lot of advantages. By carefully marking those pencil marks on the ends with the very fine pencil point, you can sand those off, and as soon as those marks disappear, then you are absolutely perfect. It saves all the trial and error. You just do it one time, it's perfect. And you don't have to do it 3 or 4 times. And that one is absolutely perfect. You can't feel it. So I will give that, maybe 30 or 40 minutes to set up and get hard before I continue on that. While that is setting up, I will turn my attention to the saddle area and make the saddle. So by the time I get the saddle completely made and everything, then the nut should be firm enough that we can proceed. As just another example of precision measuring, in this area right here, this measures 91.5 thousandths. So in other words, 91.5 thousandths. Over here, it measures 96 thousandths, 96.5 in fact. So there's 5 thousandths difference from one end to the other. Now that doesn't seem like much, but when you're trying to fit that into a perfectly sized crack, like right here, it'll be loose on one end and really tight on the other end. And I'm sure you've all seen that or felt that on something you're building or working on, and especially on guitars. We try to avoid that by getting this precision, ground. I have presently, this is extra thick. This is 103 thousandths on that end, 103 thousandths on this end. So it's exactly the same right at the moment. 103, 103. So it's pretty darn good. So you shouldn't feel that with this. Now that's assuming the slot is cut that precisely. And based on what I can tell, the slot is pretty precise. It's pretty accurate. I'm getting about 96, 97 thousandths pretty much everywhere I go. There's 99, there's 98. So there you go. So it's pretty accurate. Right presently, this won't fit down in there because it's just a little bit bigger. I have left it a little long and I've left it a little thick so that I can sneak up on it, as I often say. So now we're going to run this through the thickness sander and knock off just enough to get it down in there. I'm not really showing the thickness sander part, but I'm just pushing it through with a push stick through the thickness sander to just barely knock off any. As you can probably see, it wants to start down in there now, and it kind of will almost, and you probably could really force it, but more than likely you'd crack your bridge. Right now it's at 100 thousandths exactly. I'm measuring this at about 97, 98 thousandths, and so we don't want a press fit. We just want a snug fit. So we really just need to take off about another thousandth or two, and this should fit perfectly. How do I do that? My table on my sander just moves like this, and a full revolution is 125 thousandths, so I just barely move it at all, and I get about 1/1000th of an inch. And to me, that's a perfect fit. See, it doesn't fall down in there, it sits there, and you just push it down in with one finger. That is what I call a perfect fit. All right, so now I need to get the ends rounded off to make it fit perfectly on the length also. Now that I have the first end rounded off in just about the perfect shape, what I do now is I fit it in there. I don't put it down very deep in the slot. I just barely have it in the slot. I fit the end, and then I come over here and look under this end and find out where the end of the slot is, and then I just try to mark that, and then I take it out and I double check it even, because you can just have something in the wrong spot, because you only get one shot at this, otherwise you got to start over. All right, so I've got it marked there, and then basically I just sneak up on that. I'll leave that mark, I'll round this end off and see how it fits, and I just keep doing that until it fits perfectly and I can just push it straight down in. So I'm not going to show the rest of that because I'm just going to round it off just like I did just a moment ago on this end. If anything, even a little less pressure and just a little bit more care in the rounding, because I only get one shot at this end. It took me exactly 3 tries, but then I've got it just as tight as it can be. There's no in play, doesn't move any direction, there's no flopping back and forth. It's just a perfect fit. That's what you're going for. That's what will also make it sound the best. So in other words, you really can't do any better than that. That's what you're looking for right there. See how it fit in there perfectly snug, and but it just takes finger pressure to push it down in there. Once I get that set, then I always draw a line across the back to just double check that it's going in the full depth, and you can see the line is pretty even all the way across. So I think everything's fine that way too. Now I'm just going to more or less estimate how tall I need the saddle. I know the other one wasn't real tall and it didn't need to be, so I know I don't want this one to be real tall. I'm just going to estimate, and I'm going to make it a little tall, obviously, again, and I always, like I say, sneak up on it. I've got a pretty good line there, dark line, that I'll cut it off to. Well, the fretboard's in good shape. It's all been cleaned. The frets have been polished. Everything's good. So now we're just going to oil the fretboard up. Boiled linseed oil. There's a close-up of the fretboard. Now keep in mind, I haven't even grooved this yet, and this is standing up tall. But the fretboard itself is up in pretty darn good shape. Couldn't be much better. Looks almost like brand new from the factory, perhaps even better. Now I'm going to take the saddle back out. This looks like it has, at one time, has had some kind of finish on it. I'd prefer not to have a finish on these. I've got some 220. I think I'll just start with that and see how that does. It's looking better. There's still a few little tiny nicks in it. I think I'll just go ahead and sand it a little more. That's pretty nice. I'm not going to try to get down on the edges because you'll just scratch the guitar and all that, and I don't think you'll notice it enough to matter. In other words, trying to sand those edges would cause more trouble than you would benefit, so there's no reason to do it. You really can't tell much difference by looking at it anyway. It's just that now this is just oiled and smooth and really slick, and it just looks so much nicer. Okay, I think we're just about ready to try this setup, though looking at the peg head up here, I'm not real happy with the way this looks. It's kind of dulled and messed up a little bit. She kind of wants it to look good. That's not her main goal. If we can improve the looks without spending them a lot of money, I think she's probably all for it. Not exactly sure what to do here. I'd almost have to take the tuning keys off to fix that. Tuning keys seem to be solid. I think it's worth doing because that's pretty dull looking up there and just kind of messed up, and it'll just look nice. And it will only take about 10 minutes probably. Famous last words. Now I'm a little concerned about popping these out because this could pop the finish, and I don't want to do that, obviously. So I'm just going to see what happens if they'll come out on their own without too much trouble. Looks like they're going to come out okay. Got a little wooden dowel that I think will knock them out a little easier. Yeah, they all came out just fine, no problem. So I'm just going to polish this up and make it look a little better. I think I'll just start with, like 1500 or 2000 sandpaper and just go over it lightly. This is actually 1200. That little chip that I knocked out, I can sand that too now, and that'll kind of blend in, I think, a little better. You got to be careful on this logo. I don't want to sand through and knock the logo out. I'm not going to sand it very much. I'm just going to sand it enough to get rid of the dullness, and kind of make it all even. That's probably enough. That looks pretty good. We'll go to 2000. We got a piece of 2000 now. This ought to blend it pretty well. That's probably enough already. That looks good, and everything's even now. So now I'll get the semi-chrome polish, and we'll apply a little bit of that, and very sparingly. Take a clean little towel and buff it out, and it probably will be fine. Yeah, it looks much better. I think you can see the difference there in the shininess and the way it looks. Just much nicer looking. I will go ahead and put the wax on that now. And again, I just use this Renaissance paste wax. It's good stuff. Most any good furniture paste wax would be fine. Car paste waxes, as long as they don't have a lot of chemicals in them, would be fine. Well, that's just about as good as it needs to be. That's just about perfect. That just makes it look better. I'm not going to do that to the whole guitar, or am I? I'm a little concerned about doing the whole guitar. I think it's going to take a lot of extra time, and we don't have that much time in this right at the moment, so I don't see in spending their money unnecessarily. I will just take this dry rag and I'm going to just more or less hand buff this with this same rag. These rags themselves will actually polish a guitar. That's the thing I like about these cloths. Off camera, so you know, I went back and worked on these cracks some more, put some more glue in them. I feel like they're, real well done at this point. I don't think you're going to be able to see this very well, but you can see inside, I can see how the glue has penetrated. Doubt you'll be able to see that at all, and I doubt I could get the camera where you could see it. But the glue has penetrated. You can see it all the way through and all the way back through here. So I think we're in good shape. And yet you really can't even tell that I did anything from the top if you look at it from the top side. Let's get this thing strung up. Got to put the hardware back on it first. It's probably been 5 or 10 minutes since I oiled this, and now this, you can see the oil has wicked back out here. And that's a common issue with the linseed oil. If you put it on dry bare wood, especially like where there's holes like this, where the oil can wick down inside the wood more, it will wick its way back out after a while, and so you should just wipe it back off. It does that on the fretboard too. I've wiped the fretboard off a time or two already, so we should be good to go. I believe I've shown my technique for making the nuts in the past, but this one's still sitting up awful high. I probably could have taken it down some more, but it's not that big a deal. You just take a small double cut file, and that's what I use, and you can take them down pretty quickly. I kind of like to take them down on the instrument because I can follow the contour and kind of get everything even. Now you keep in mind, this is still the natural deer antler curve here that we're working with. I won't lie to you, I let the file slip, so I gotta clean up a little mark there. You'll never see it now, and I'll just be more careful. It's looking pretty good, but it's still just a little high, I think. I probably could have cut this way down. I think I'm good there. I'm going to go ahead and oil that back. There's generally enough oil left on the rag to do something like that. So that's what I'll do. Okay, and then my method for doing this is probably a little non-conventional. I just eyeball where I think the string ought to be, something like that. Take the fretting file, and I just kind of rough me a gouge there, just a little bit of a deal. You can use this, I used to use this for years and never did it use anything else. And as long as you use it like a file and keep it rotating, it cuts a nice slot. And you can widen it by turning it sideways and widen the slot. And the thing about this is, keep that angle, about equal to your peg head. All right, and then this side, then I would just cut straight. I think this kerf is about a 23 thousandths, I think. I'm not really sure. So it cuts a slightly bigger slot than you need for some of the strings, but it doesn't hurt anything. I'd rather actually have them oversized than undersized, because when they're pinched, you got problems. As long as they're not pinched, it doesn't really matter. So I say again, I'd much, much prefer them be oversized slots than undersized slots. Okay, I think that's good enough for right now. That gives me 2 slots that I can work with, and I know they're gonna be high, but that gives me my starting point right there. So now we'll get those 2 strings on and see what we've got. I thought I'd go ahead and polish this truss rod cover before I put it back on there. It's pretty nasty looking. I could probably polish it just with one of these blue cloths all by itself. Of course, I'll just go ahead and use the semi-chrome on it. Now, someone did recommend just recently that I use a plastic polish that they recommended. They worked in the plastic industry, and that would be great. I don't have a problem with that at all, and I'm sure it would be superior. But this stuff works really good too, and it only takes a few seconds. It may look like it takes longer, but I did this in real time to show you how quick it is and how good of a job it does. No more plastic than I polish. I can't really see why I need to do anything better than that. And like I said, it does just a great job. I am going to put this back on now that I've taken it off. I think I'm going to put it on like this instead of the way they had it. I think it looks better, and I think putting it on this way, it really doesn't fit real well between these 2 knobs. I think it got turned over somewhere in the life of this guitar. I do know that some of them are put on upside down, but I don't think this one was. Then again, sure as I say that, some will prove me wrong.
and that's okay. Go ahead and prove me wrong. I like the look of it better this way, and even if you prove me wrong, I'm still turning it this way. It just looks nicer, I think. The holes have been moved. I didn't realize that. There's multiple holes. That ain't good. But these two holes look like they're gonna work, and they look like they're gonna cover enough, so I'll just go ahead and use them. I think these were the original holes here that I'm putting it in. That looks much better. And the plastic looks much, much better. So there you go. Now that's what it looks like now. Just almost looks new. There's an end pin. I'm going to look and see if it fits in there. It does. I'm just gonna bop it in by hand. That should be tight enough right there. I'll just tap it in. Everything's a hammer. I think that's gonna be solid. Okay, I think we are ready to put the strings on it now, and I'm choosing to use her lights. She provided these strings. I do use these as well. These are J16s. No, these are J26s, is what these are. But they're 11s to 52s. I think this guitar, with the neck issues it has and with the two cracks along through here, I think the lights are the right choice for this guitar, and I will recommend to her that she only use light strings on it in the future because of that. She had asked about new pins. I don't think the pins are gonna matter that much. I would just go ahead and reuse these if it were my guitar, but everybody's different. I've shown this string technique multiple times. Every time I show it, people just get a kick out of it. So I'm showing you here, especially on the bass side, I pull the string as tight as I can get it, I wrap it around the post, one full turn, and then I come back around and I go right through the hole above the strings that I've already wrapped. So basically you're wrapping, you know, down the post because you started at the bottom and you're wrapping up with this loose end, so the string itself is going down the post, and that's what you want. And you see there, you don't need a winder or anything, because the instant you stick it through there, it's tight already. There's none of that twisting and winding and all that stuff. It's an incredibly fast way. It's an incredibly accurate way to do it. Well, actually, I'm only going to put on the outer two strings. I forgot, because I don't have the rest of them marked yet. And so I usually put the outer two strings on before I even mark the other ones. Although I could have marked the rest of them with just the two outer strings marked. Now on this side, I do it differently. I go ahead and pull it through because these are so much smaller. Now you could do the same thing and just wrap it a couple of more times. You could do that, and no problem at all. But typically on this side, I stick it through the hole like that, leave about this much space, not very much, come back under it, pull it up tight, and wrap it over like that. Now this side, you will have to wind it a little bit, but it's still not a ton of winding. Just a little bit of winding. I don't use a string winder because I don't find this much of a problem when I'm only, winding it around the post about 2 times, something like that. You could use a string winder in that case. You could do the other method on these little strings too and just wrap it a couple more times. And I have done that often and it works fine. This way locks it in for sure. You're not gonna have any trouble. Either way works fine. Okay, so now that I've got these in place, I just like to have that visual there. And then I just take a piece of paper. It doesn't really matter. I lay the paper on it like so, and then I just mark where this string is. And then I know it sounds stupid, but I just guesstimate where I think the next string should be. And I mark it on the paper and like that. And then I just go across and I transfer. And it's just a guess. And often I'm not right, especially on the first attempt. But in this case, I'm exactly right on the first attempt. Now, that's rare, I'll be honest with you. I usually have to do it twice, sometimes 3 times even. But that's just a good way of getting it even all the way across there. It works, And I don't need any fancy machines or whatever, and every neck is different size, and that method works on no matter what size neck it is, And again, I just set them in there very lightly the first time I do it. If I look at it and it's not perfectly matched, I can always move them a little bit. This is just a light cut at this point, and the strings are very high. You notice how I'm pointing it at the post that I'm going to. So now we'll go ahead and just put the rest of the strings on there real quick. I'll bring you back when I'm ready to do the next step. I thought I'd go ahead and show these last 2 strings going on, and they're on the small side.
And I'll use the first method, the same method I use on the bass strings. And again, you just pull it up tight, wrap it around once, and I'm gonna go 2.5 times on these. And then once you get it, around there that second time, you just gotta make sure there's room above there to go back through and above your strings. And you pull it up tight, and you really are already tight. So, just a turn or two and you're already making noise. Like I said, the extra wraps on the small strings is a good idea. This littlest string, I like to lock it for sure. You just don't have any trouble that way. And again, I'll go ahead and do this one the same way and just wrap the multiple wraps. 1, 2, we'll go 3. We'll slide them down the post. I'll go around another halfway around here and slide it through. Pull it up tight, straight up like that to kind of lock it itself in place. Clip it off, tighten it up, and you're good. You're already tight. Now I'm going to look at these strings and see about the spacing. And honestly, the spacing is probably just a hair off. Probably these 3 strings need to go that way, just a hair. Some of that's just the thickness of the way the thin strings are. So I'm just going to show you how I do that. I just bring this over like this and then just bring it down. And that will be enough. It really doesn't need much. I'm being picky, And that moved that one. Now we'll just do the same thing with this one. Again, I'm just gonna cut on that side of the hole. And then in this case, I've got to round it a little bit because this is a wrapped string. And that should have done it for that one. And then I'm gonna move this one just that way a hair too. That looks more even. Okay, now the action is crazy high. There's a lot of ways to do that. I could just take my regular nut files and cut it down, but because I've got the saw out, I'll just go ahead and saw it a little bit more, keeping my angle consistent. This way there'll be less for this file to take out. Probably need to go down quite a bit more yet. I'm sure the saddle is high also. I'm going to leave it a little bit high till I look at the saddle end. I don't want to get it down too low and have buzzing issues. It's still quite high, so I'm going to take it down some more. Okay, they're still high, but that's closer. This one here is not quite as high, I don't think. Needs a little bit. It looks good. This one's not as high either. And then again, on this side, it is a little higher. That's not too bad. Still a little high, but not bad. And then finally, the last one. And again, this saw is probably a little bit wide for this string, but not bad. Hit the first part of it with saw, and then go ahead and take it down with the narrow file. While they're all still high, I can tell, they're not terribly high. I'm just going to look at this saddle end and see what we need to do there. It would be a good idea to get the saddle end closer before I get the nut all the way down. Okay, we're going to check the action down here. I've got it up to pitch. I know the action's quite high, but that's okay. I wanted to get it up to pitch first to really check it. It's going to be crazy high. Okay, it's 150 thousandths. That's as high as this measures, and that's about where it's at. So we're going to say 150, write that down. Measure on this side, and it's about 140, I'm going to just say. It's just approximate. It's pretty close though. Okay, so on the 150 side I want 90, so that means we're 60 thousandths high, which means we got to take off 120 thousandths, which is almost 1/8 of an inch. On the 140 side we want 80, so that means we're 60 high there as well, and that means we're going to take off 120 thousandths on that side. So basically what that means is this is sticking up about 150 thousandths, so we're going to take off almost the full height of this. It's going to be sitting almost level with the wood when we're done here. That's step number 1, so we're going to see what happens. Now the way I mark off that 120 thousandths is I set this to 120, and it's kind of difficult to get it exactly on 120, but if you work with it long enough you can get it pretty close. And there it is. We're right on 120 there. So there we go. I've already blackened both ends, and I'll just scratch across that black. Wow, that's a lot. We're getting rid of almost this whole saddle.
And I'm a little uncomfortable taking it that far, but pretty much know that that's what it's going to need. I'm going to leave those lines by just a hair and see what happens. We may have to do this a couple of times, but I'd rather sneak up on it than just blow it out of the water. I've taken the saddle down pretty much that full amount, and it's just proud of the surface now. It's only proud of the surface by 60 thousandths, maybe something like that, which is enough, but that's going to create problems behind here. Now, a lot of people would just instantly sand this bridge down, and you could do that because this bridge has enough thickness that we could do that, but it also has some hump here, and if you sand this down, you're weakening it. I would much prefer, in this case, again, another case I might do it differently, but in this case I would like to go ahead and just cut these grooves out a little bit more so that the string can come up and go over the top of these and still be pulling down, rather than thin down the whole bridge. In my opinion, that's an easier solution, and it solves the same problem, that it gets the string to break over that saddle, and you didn't weaken the bridge nearly as much because there was already a little groove there anyway, so all we did was elongated it just a little bit. Okay, and now we will put the strings on it again and see what it's like. Okay, now that we got her tuned up, let's just check it and see where we're at. I think we're going to be pretty low. We're 90 on the money, man. I mean, like 90 on the money. On the money. On this side, we're probably pretty close to the 80. Let's see here. Probably 80, 85. Definitely less than 90. And up here, we're pretty close already, but we're not there. We're probably 25 thousandths on this, and probably a little higher on this one, probably about 40 on that one. Okay, so let's work on this end now, and I get out my little 18 thousandths pick. Okay, so now we'll take the 18 thousandths pick and work on this end, and look at there, it's not very much high. You know, I said this is probably around 20 thousandths, and that's pretty close, and this one's really on the money. This one's on the money too. This is quite high on this side. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Problem with this side is that the groove is getting so deep that I need to knock some of it off because I don't like to have the string down in there that deep. Let's see where we're at now. I think we're still quite high. Yeah, we're still quite high. This next string's still pretty high too, so while I've got that one off and I can file the nut down better, I'm going to take this one down some more. That lets me file the nut a little bit better too. Okay, so we'll work backwards and put the G string in first and see if it's close. I think it's pretty close. Yeah, it's right on the money. It holds the pick. We'll go with the B string next, and to be honest, the B string's still a hair high. Pretty low now. Actually, you might have got it a hair low, but probably a little tighter than I wanted it. As long as it's not buzzing, it seems like it's okay. It's going to be pretty low. The E string is probably a little bit high, but not too bad. Looks like that's going to get it too. Yeah, that's good. I don't see any problem. I don't hear any problem. Check all the frets and make sure everything's good. You don't need to hear me do that on every string, so I'll show you what it looks like here in just a minute. My friends, I hope the customer's pleased with this because in my opinion, we saved a lot of extra work by being able to cut everything down, straighten everything out. You know, honestly, looking down that fretboard now, it just looks almost perfect compared to the way it came in. And it came in pretty bad shape, really. This is pretty darn good, too. I maybe can see the string angle is good, and it's good all the way on every string. I checked the intonation off camera. The intonation's almost spot on. I mean, it's 5 cents in a place or two, but 5 cents isn't that bad. And that's hardly worth worrying about. Actually, it was only 5 cents, I think, on one string, and the rest of them were less than that. So it's pretty good. The fretboard looks just like brand new. That nut really is a nice, good piece of antler there. Same way back here, that piece of antler is going to make it sound good. I wouldn't mess with this pick guard if it were mine. I mean, that's got the vintage look, and you ain't going to fix that. If you take that off, you're just going from, you know, pretty good to worse, I guarantee you, no matter what you put on there. Those cracks, I don't think in this case are related to the pick guard. Now, she has that in her head that that's what's happened. That is common. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's what caused this. I think this got dropped heavily, maybe even while in the case. You see that fairly common where you see 2 cracks down both sides of the fretboard. Generally, it's some kind of percussion. It's some kind of a drop, or it fell over or something like that. Almost always. I dropped one time when I was building it. I didn't drop it exactly. The holder broke and it fell down and hit like this, and it caused those 2 cracks. That's why I know that generally those 2 cracks are caused by some kind of a percussion issue. So anyway, this thing is, it's like perfect. It plays like butter. So I hope the customer is as happy with it as I am. Let's just let you hear it. Nice and clear, you know. I checked every fret on every string. Very clear. If you'd like to hear me play and sing a song on this, well, we'll have another video following this one with the exact same number with just an S after the number. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something.